Hey, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial we're going to be starting off our advert project with this little bubble character or booble character. It's a little blue robot from the O2 adverts, so we're going to pretty much duplicate the exact robot, and later on we'll film some footage and we'll put it into the shots. We'll go through the entire process of creating a shot advert, basically. So we're kind of pretending that maybe this is like your first freelance job, and this is sort of how I would go through and do stuff. So apart from this, we're going to skip the concept stage because the concept's already done, the design is already done, because we're just going to use the one that's already been created because it's great and it works. So we're just going to duplicate it, but feel free to make your own robot. In fact, yeah, like if you want to, just copy this one, then afterwards make your own little robot and show us what you've made. That would be great. But I'm just going to stop going on because I'm just chatting rubbish now. So let's get started with blocking out this little robot character. Okay, so I've opened up Maya, and you don't have to be using Maya. You can use anything really. You can use Blender, Houdini, Cinema 4D, and anything really. I just use Maya because I've just used it for a long time, and that's what I use at work. So yeah, don't feel intimidated if I'm using a different piece of software because the principles are pretty much exactly the same. I'm just using Maya as sort of my foundation software, which you can use any sort of software. So anyway, so what we're going to do in this stage is just block out our anim. So block out our character. So the first thing that I want to do is bring in some reference. I'm just going to go to panels, and I'm just going to use my orthographic camera because I don't want to play around with a focal length. I'm just going to select my front, and you can see that we just have no perspective in orthographic. Then I'm just going to select my camera, go view, image plane, and import image. So I'll upload these so you can download them, but you can grab them pretty much. You might be able to even find better ones, to be honest. I've just grabbed a few because it's not an overly complicated sort of character. We can pretty much see what we need to do in most of these things. But what we want to do is pick a very generic basic one for our blocking so we can get we can match the proportions basically. So we're not going to model this perfectly straight away. We're just going to completely block it out, and this will probably be quite a quick tutorial. So I'm going to load in, I think this one's higher resolution, but okay, because that one's got his head straight. So I'm just going to click open on that one. And you can see it's not great resolution, but we don't need anything that big. And so yeah, we're pretty much just going to, you can just scale this up if you want, you want it a bit bigger. We'll worry about scale after we've done this. But for now, what we'll do, we're just going to remove our grid and scale it up. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to my channel box editor. Obviously, you can leave that as... So I'm actually just going to create a normal cylinder, see how big that is. And that will be a 1 centimeter radius. So that will be 2 centimeters wide. So let's just do a very, very rough scale of this. Let's assume possibly that neck is 5 centimeters wide, but we can do a more accurate guesstimation with this. Yeah, but if we get it sort of roughly correct, it should help us out a bit. And I have just aligned it there, so I know that that's at the center, and it'll just make it easier for me to because sometimes your ref might be like that when you bring it in all like this, but at least now whenever I load something in at the center, it's always in the origin, and it's going to make things a lot easier. So I'm just going to add a layer for this. So I've selected my image plane. I'm just going to stick on this little white square of a little colored circle, and it should make a layer. And I could double click on that and just call this ref. And I'm going to change this to R. So now, no matter what I do, I can't change that at all. There's my cylinder, and I can't select it. So it's there forever until I decide to unreference it. So without blabbering on as much, so I'm just going to start blocking this out, and I don't know why I deleted that, so I'm just going to start with a cylinder. I'm just going to scale this up, and you'll notice that we can't really see much, so let's we can change it to wireframe if we want, which for this case is absolutely fine because we're only going to be blocking it, so we almost don't even really have to leave this view that much until we start doing these side bits. But we're just going to do this front bit and do his head. So I am going to very roughly block it in. And at the moment, I'm just assuming that this is perfectly cylindrical. It may not be, but what you can do is you can either go to the poly cylinder and add some subdivision heights, or you can just do a multi-cut. I think for this it's probably just easier to do it this way. I'm just going to right click, select the vertices, and I'm making sure I'm selecting all of them and selecting in the middle, so I'm uniformly scaling it. So although this is kind of like a beginner's one, you kind of do need to know a little bit of the sort of controls and UI. So all I'm doing here is just holding right click and selecting vertex, sorry. That I'm only moving, because I'm in an orthographic, I can only move it in the X and Y. So I know everything, as long as I scale everything from this middle bit, I'm scaling it uniformly. I don't want to scale that one because it looks pretty much like that's... And we can refine this much more later. We just want something so we can use it as our base reference, then pretty much we'll break it down into head parts and body parts and stuff like that. So if I now go to my perspective, my smooth shade all, and you can see we've created this shape here, which is just the head shape. And we're just going to continue doing that with everything else. Not worrying about the details or anything like this, or naming. We're going to pretty much block it all together. So it's just so we can block it out. So I'm just going to go back to my front. And I'm just going to select a sphere. And look, because I sort of lined my reference up to the center, I actually don't have to move, because I can't be 100% certain of the position of this, of how it's been posed in shot. If I try and match it up everything, it's going to be a little bit off. So I've used this as my I've accepted that this is my center, and this is probably all fairly symmetrical. So I don't want to be, so if I go to my wireframe, I don't want to be sort of adjusting all these little things. At this present time, I just want to scale and move everything uniformly. So I'm just going to bring this down so I don't actually need that much detail. Still 14 by 14. And I'm keeping everything central because, like I said, I don't know about the pose. So you can see that it's off here, but I'm not worried about that. We're just at the blocking stage. But I do want to at least sort of get... So you kind of almost want to pick one side, effectively, to get that sort of... And I'm pretty sure there's like a little seam up there, but we'll have a look at that afterwards. And we don't have to do anything more of this. We can just leave that there because it's just blocking. Just don't worry about if it's a mess. We just want to get it looking good in the blocking stage. So I'm just going to create another cylinder. We don't need 20 subdivisions on that, so we can just go like 12 or something. I'm just going to scale this up. Or you can just select your vertice. And you can see what I mean by we're actually kind of off, but we don't know the pose of this. This is probably very unlikely straight on, but also when this was probably rendered. It will have some perspective. We're not working with any perspective at the moment, as you can see. So everything looks, our CG at the moment looks very flat. So we're just still ignoring it. We're just making sure we get the correct sort of sizings, not necessarily matching it. So I'm just going to select up here, and I'm just using all these tools up here to make a torus now. So I'm just going to bring this up. I can rotate that 90 degrees. And I know it's not going to, I don't want to align this. I know I keep saying that, but sometimes you can be quite tempted to sort of go, well, it doesn't quite fit, so I'll just move it along. But now you're kind of breaking the symmetry of all of this. So you've just got to trust everything, that you've kept everything in the center. It's going to my attribute editor. Just going to bring up my radius. And at the moment, I'm kind of mostly matching with the height. So, like I said, we don't need super loads of detail. We can get it rough. If you can't quite get the exact measurements you want, you can scale it after a while. Ooh. And just something like that. We're not going hyper detailed. Cool. So I'm actually not going to make an so I can press Control D. I'm not sure if just D, and just duplicate it. So I'm just duplicating that bit. And I'm still leaving it in the center. Like, if you need to sort of check the size of it, you can to move it, but I'm just making sure, like I say, I know I'm repeating myself quite a lot, but it's really important you do sort of keep it all central, because when you go to making this, you want it all central, then you'll pose it into that position. So I'm not bothered that any of this is overlapping. And we will also put these eye sockets in as well. So I will just Control D on that cylinder and rotate this around 90 degrees. And these will probably be a little bit different, so I'm just going to try and match it. Yeah, and that's about right. So what I can do is also tear off a copy of this. And that's gone into my other window here. If I go to my perspective, you can see that if I go back to my shading and smooth shade all, it's obviously inside the head of it. So if I'll just scale this until it pokes out. And I don't want to, in fact, why is that? It's because we've changed the pivot point of it. It shouldn't matter because it's at the center anyway. And because we've kept everything at the center, if we rotate this now, and it's not. So let's go to modify. If we just hide it's quite difficult when you've just got one screen. So that should be, just press insert. Maybe because we've reused it. And we want to make sure that we can see that our pivot point's in the center now. So now if we rotate this around, we can see that it's rotating around the center. I think it was doing that anyway. It was just looking, maybe I was just. So I know it's kind of looking a bit funky in here, but what we're really focusing on is getting this sort of eyelet the eye hole orientated the correct way. So ignore that, that's kind of like that. I'm just going to Control D and duplicate that. actually, before I do that, I'm going to zero it out. Make sure that I keep note that that is zeroed out. I'm just going to rotate this round. And I can see that this is probably minus 28 degrees. So now if I duplicate that, I can do 28 degrees, and I know that will be symmetrical, even though it's not matching up the... Because at the moment I'm kind of already matching to the left side and just being symmetrical to the right. Because I don't want to sort of adjust it every time, because that's kind of breaking the symmetry of it. And it's a robot, like one of the main things about the robot, they're incredibly symmetrical. Cool. So let's see how long this is. We've been recording for just 40 minutes. So let's try and get this. Let's try and get this all blocked out quite quickly. Cool. And you can sort of see where we're getting at now, and we can see that our head is starting to resemble the robot head. We're only at the blocking stage. Don't worry if it looks a bit naff. Cool. So I'm just going to put that back over there for now, and I'm going to go back to my orthographic on this one, just because it's easier to sort of work in one window. Cool. Now we've got this another sort of shape here, and this shape is actually fairly similar to this one. So if we can Control D, bring this down, and we're just going to scale down. And I would not be surprised if that's going to fit nicely straight away. It's probably purely by design that it does that. And I know that it's kind of not exactly fitting here, but we still want to keep with the symmetry. So I'm just going to scale this in the X and Y to sort of fit. We're just worrying about the scale. Cool. So now we've got the body, and we can just also duplicate this sphere down. It's quite hard to tell what's going on with that. This is the sort of beauty of the blocking out stage. Although why is that not in the middle? Seem to have moved that by accident. Cool. I know this is huge, but it doesn't matter. Cool, so we can go to our perspective and just see how it's all going. And we've got something that's sort of resembling the robot. So I know these shapes may not be exact, but we can take it as sort of guesstimates. So also with these sort of arms, I'm just going to Control duplicate that sphere. And I'm just going to scale this down so it's sort of roughly the right sort of size and height. And we're just going to build the one side of the arms now, and we'll probably have to do something else about the hands, but yeah. So we'll just put that there, and we'll finish off the torso and probably the legs. So what we can also do is go to perspective. In fact, I will just open up. Let's just open up some more like reference, so we can just see what the arms. I probably should have set this up. In the next one, I'll set it up in the pure ref because it's Probably a lot easier. Cool, so we can actually see, it's probably a circle, and we've got this sort of seam stuff, which we'll add in afterwards. Like at this stage, we're literally just blocking it, so don't worry. And we've got this sort of ball on the inside, which we won't worry about for now. Thick arm, then a cylinder, then the hands are kind of blocky. And the same with the legs, they're kind of cylinders as well. So you can sort of see that this is definitely posed, because you can sort of possibly see his arms are not completely flat down. It's really hard to tell, but you can sort of see by I think that this is sort of a straight edge here. You can see that it's at an angle. So I'm just going to duplicate that. Get that sort of right size. It's quite difficult to tell. What we can do is actually, what would make more sense is if we duplicate that, and we can hold V and sort of snap it to the center of that sphere. So now that's aligned in the center. Let's rotate that 90 degrees. This is kind of seeing how this probably how this arm works as well. So although this has got like, if we look at the sort of, this is like a hard sleeve, so that's not moving, but the inside bit is like a ball joint. So we can assume that this bit sort of comes straight out, flush with the inner ball, and the ball just rotates. So I'm actually just going to duplicate that, scale that down to pretend it's sort of that ball. And like I said, this is all just guesstimation. And I am going to select the cylinder. I'm just going to drop it under that sphere. So now when I rotate this, you can sort of see how that's going to work. Possibly could be at an angle. We'll have to look at some more reference. It's not really. So maybe that actually comes down flat with it. It's not actually coming out perpendicular to it. It's possibly something more like that. And then it's sort of like very small amount beveled in. Let's make sure that's in there. And we can play with the sort of sizings of it, and it's our reference isn't exactly super clear, and we can readjust this. It's just to get the sort of blocking through. So we go back to our perspective. So let's hide that and see how that looks. See that ball's in there, so that would sort of rotate right like that. And I imagine it's like that because it's a shoulder, and it makes more sense to be like that. So what we can do now is go back to our orthographic front. duplicate that again. Let's go back to our wireframe. I'm just going to roughly scale this to a similar thickness to what I can sort of see. And probably just going to actually, because that's probably aligned with that for now. So if I select this one, then select that. If I select this sort of, I guess, upper arm bone and then to the elbow joint, I just go to my animation and go constrain, go orient. No, I want to constrain point. So undo that. Sorry about that. So let's constrain point. So probably good to always check that it's in the center. So let's modify center of the pivot so it's in the center. Then I'll do it again. Constraint point. So now I know that that's, without like snapping it, I can just use a quick point constraint and just like throw it in there. Now I know that's aligned. So if I pull that out, and you can sort of see it it looks like it's, you'll get this sometimes. You see it's kind of drifting. So we can do, it's currently on component for some reason, so that might be why. But we can do a long rotational axis, and now that's going to do it 100% on the rotational axis. And this will undoubtedly rotate, so I'm just going to sort of do an average sort of size of this, and I'm not trying to match it here, because then effectively, if I do that, I know I keep saying this over and over, but it's really important that you do keep an eye on it. It means if we try and match it, we're going to sort of break the sort of shape of it. So we want to make sure that it's like that, because we'll pose it in the correct way once it's all rigged. And the only purpose of this is just to get a decent scaling purpose. So I do think that's a little bit bigger. Probably not so chunky. Then if I look, so I'm going to switch between the reference. I can see there's a little bit in there, but we'll worry about that afterwards. And you can see that this part of the hand here is another sort of straight cylinder and a ball joint. So I'm just going to duplicate that again. Control D. And I'm just going to move this down and can do the same again. I'm just going to point. You can orientate it, but it's not so much of a problem. Right? We'll worry about that afterwards. We're just, like I said, just blocking at the moment. Just so we can get the sort of a decent relative scale of things. So I'll probably say that's about right. I'll say you could be making your own robot. So this is a fairly simple robot, but it's you'll be surprised actually how, I know it looks simple, it can be a little bit complex sometimes. Just tiny little details in it, so don't ever underestimate things that look fairly simple. This is probably in that category, but so let's make a cylinder, a sphere, and I can just do that again. I can go constrain point. I can do orientate as well if I want. And just by looking at the reference, I can see that this ball is about half the thickness wider. It's possibly something like that. And we do not need a huge amount of polygons in this. And probably coming up to the more tricky part is actually the hands, because we can't actually see them that well in here apart from using the other reference. So just for blocking wise, we can sort of see the shape is, I guess, a really almost rectangle, but probably just slightly trapeze. So it's not as wide on the bottom, but sort of wider at the top. And there's kind of like a little indent here. And you can sort of see here that it's thinner here and it gets a little bit wider. It's almost like a coffin shape here. So we can sort of almost match that roughly just by looking at this. And let's go to our perspective. So sometimes you might just have to go out of your orthographic, and we'll go to our shading. This is taking a little bit longer than I thought it would. Hopefully you guys are not bored of it already. It's a bit longer than I wanted to go on for. I don't know whether to... Let's just do this palm, then we'll do the rest in a second one. So I don't want to do an hour long because you'll probably not want to watch it. Trying to cut these down, but it's increasingly more and more difficult because there's just quite a lot of information in this. A lot of the stuff, sorry. So I'm just going to snap that there. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, I should set up pure F, sorry. So it's going to make it, it's probably about, I'm just going to match that by eye for now. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to point and orientate so I know it's in the same orientation. Then I know that this is poking out a little ways. So in the next one I'll set up the pure F. And now I'm just kind of matching it and how much it sort of overlaps from the rest. Just in the width and the depth of it. It's wider than that elbow joint by a fair ways. And I can just pull this down, not extruding, I'm just putting the face. I know that this is sort of wider. In fact, I forgot to say that it's actually like a coffin shaped, so for Control E. I feel that's not wide enough. Cool, and we're over 30 minutes, so I'm just gonna cut it off for there, and we'll continue it in the second part where we'll do the fingers, and then and you can continue on. It's pretty much just blocking it out, but yeah, I don't want it to be too much longer. I'm trying to keep them around half an hour. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this. I know we haven't done loads. I was hoping it'd be a lot quicker, but don't forget to save it. And we'll continue in the next one. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.